Record. Great. All right, and here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give folks another minute or so to connect, and then we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. We'll just get started in another minute here. Thanks for joining on a lovely Thursday evening. Hi, Emily. All right, all. Well, I'm not going to punish the punctual. I think we'll go ahead and get started here. We are recording this meeting, so you can share it with your friends, neighbors, colleagues after the fact on our engage.bozeman.net/UDC site. We'll make sure to drop that link in the chat here as we go. But thanks everyone for being here. This is the first of a handful of Code Connect webinars that we'll be hosting throughout the duration of this project. So we're happy you're here. My name is Danny Hess. I'm the city's community engagement coordinator, and I am joined here by Tom. Tom, you want to wave and say hi?
Hi, everyone. Tom Rogers here.
And Colin and Ryan from the Code Studio team.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Colin Scoff, Code Studio. Sorry, Ryan.
No, that's all right. I'm Ryan, the eager one. Johnson, also Code Studio.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. So yeah, like I mentioned, we're going to be hosting these webinars throughout the duration of the project. And this is really just an opportunity for folks to drop in from home, hear an update about the latest efforts on this project and on our progress. But really, it's about an opportunity for you all to ask questions and provide input on the project as we go. So we're going to keep the presentation pretty short. It's going to be about 15 minutes, providing a high-level overview of the last 2 City Commission work sessions and the community engagement efforts that we've undertaken so far. And then the rest of the time is yours for questions. So just a couple of logistics here. Again, we're going to be recording, and this will be publicly available on that Engage Bozeman site. And we just ask that you be mindful and courteous of others during the presentation. That chat function is live, and so you are able to use that during the meeting. But we just ask that you keep those side conversations to a minimum while we're presenting. And then same goes with muting and unmuting. Y'all know how to use Zoom at this point, but just make sure that you're muted. If you're calling in via phone, the way that you can mute yourself, I think, is *6. You want to just scroll to the next slide? Yeah, cool. Just making sure I'm on track here. It's *6 to mute and unmute if you're dialed in by phone, and just keep yourself muted until you're called on to answer or to ask a question. And the way that we'll do Q&A at the end of the presentation is we'll have folks just raise their hand, and then we'll go through those questions in the order that they were received. If you're someone who prefers chat and doesn't want to speak out loud, that's fine too. enter that question into the chat box, and I'll be keeping my eye on that and adding your question into the queue. And then again, just because we want to make space for everyone to participate, we'll just ask that you limit one question per person to start with. And then if we get through everyone, we can come back for more. Am I missing anything, team?
No, I think you're good.
All right. I will turn it over to the Code Studio team.
And we will turn it over to Tom real quickly.
Thanks. Turning it over to Tom.
Give us a quick intro.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Thanks, Colin. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and really glad you're able to join us. And we certainly hope you find this interesting and informative. This is, as Danny had mentioned, our first Code Connect, and we'll take this and implement these a few more times throughout this project. Again, my name's Tom Rogers. I'm from Community Development. I'm kind of the honor of being able to be one of the project team people for the city side as we revise and consider and make every attempt to improve our development code and implement a number of the adopted plans, strategies, and just generally some priorities from the City Commission. But primarily, this is a result of our Bozeman Community Plan 2020, which was recently adopted, and we are in the process of implementing that. The development code, which is we call our Unified Development Code, are one of the pieces and a primary piece that kind of informs the built world, what you see when you walk down the street. In addition to that, the Commission's got a bunch of really important priorities, and one that's on the forefront of many folks is affordable housing and transportation. So these broad goals, visions, and priorities are implemented through this UDC, as we call it. The project is large. It deals with all sorts of aspects of development, and it's really too large to tackle at one sitting. So this Code Connect is here to kind of summarize some of the work that we've done to date. And we'll have more of these as we go forward. So we're having ongoing conversations with the City Commission, our planning boards, and the other advisory boards to help inform how we want to work all this. So because it's too complex, we're tackling smaller bites, and then we will integrate all of this stuff as we go forward. And I'm always available, kind of a technical person behind the scenes to help work with this great team to bring this forward. And we do have a number of upcoming events that Code Studio will dive into in just a moment, and we will go from there. But thank you again for your taking a few moments out of your Thursday evening. We look forward to your comments, questions, and I think from here, I'll pass it to the Code Studio team, who can do a quick introduction of who they are. They'll do a summary of what we've done and kind of where we're going from here, and we'll take it from there. But thank you again. Really appreciate your time and look forward to any questions.
Thanks, Tom. Just a quick introduction about the consultant team that's involved in this project. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Colin Scarr from Code Studio. Code Studio will be the project lead for this effort. We work on zoning regulations and development codes kind of all over the country. We've done some work in Missoula in the past, and then we've also done some work in Jackson, Wyoming. But we've worked in other places like the city of LA, currently working on their zoning regulations, Detroit, Cleveland. So we kind of work all around the country. So it's great to be here today. We've also got some other team members to help support us on this project. Logan Simpson, they're going to help us with sustainability issues. They're based in Fort Collins, Colorado. And then on the engagement front, we've got a firm called Interbro Partners, and they're based in Brooklyn. And they're going to help us think creatively about engagement in this project. So just to give you a sense of the timeline for this project, we started this project in the summer of this year. We're hoping to have it kind of wrapped up by the end of next year. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline. So we'll be working pretty hard to move through this effort. We've got, looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 working sessions set up with the City Commission. So we've already had 2 of those, and we're going to cover those today. So we had the first work session was on format and organization, and the second work session was on the zoning district. And so we have 4 more work sessions coming up in the next 3 or 4 months. So just to reiterate, I think Danny put this in the chat, but this is our primary mechanism or place to go for this project. So if you want to find out anything about what's going on about this project, go to the project website. It's going to be updated regularly. It's going to have, all of the City Commission work session meetings up on the website. It's going to have the material from these sessions up on the website. And potentially when we start getting into the drafting process, we're going to share those drafts through that website. And you can also comment and to stay involved in the project. So just a little bit about kind of outreach and what we've done to date. So back in September was our first trip to Bozeman. We met with staff and we met with a bunch of developers and architects. We spent 2 days touring Bozeman and learning a little bit about the place. We've met with the community board once, and we've met with the City Commission now twice. And so far this month, Inverborough, our engagement consultant, has been to town to run a series of intercept activities is what they're calling them. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second, but during that events, those events, Inverborough met with the Inner Neighborhood Council, and Code Studio has also met with Nina to talk specifically about transitions. So just a little bit more about what Inverborough's been doing. They were in town a couple of weeks ago, I think, and they set up intercept sites at 5 locations around the community where they had a board and some cards, and they were talking to folks, and people were able to fill out questionnaires, specifically like things about ADUs and things like that. And just a point of note that Inverborough is working alongside the MSU students as part of this effort.
Thank you, Colin. So to dive into a little bit of the work that we've been doing during our visits to town, and specifically the 2 work sessions we've had so far with the City Commission that Colin mentioned, we focused on 2 different topics so far. So the first session, we really talked about formatting, layout, and organization of the code document itself, as well as some other sort of related issues. And then at our second work session, just over a week ago now in October, we started to dig into the zoning districts. As Colin sort of previewed on that timeline slide, we have 4 more work sessions currently scheduled to focus on sustainability, where especially Logan Simpson will sort of be taking the lead, and we'll dig heavily into current regulations and best practices, parking and commercial zoning districts and sort of issues related to those topics in January, parks related regulations in February, and then transportation, active transportation and other transportation sort of development issues in March. So at our first work session on layout, formatting and layout, we really sort of came in looking at what the established goals for the UDC revision project are. And these are things that came from the community plan, that came from the bidding process, and came directly from commission sort of previously adopted guidance. And so top of mind was to organize the code to make it more intuitive and more logically sort of organized, ensuring that the different articles of the code and chapters were succinct, but still followed a logical pattern. Materials easy to find and reference so that you aren't jumping around multiple places. Things are together when they should be together, and that they aren't repeated unnecessarily to avoid duplication mistakes. What you see on the screen now is a sort of side-by-side outline of the existing code and the proposed high-level organization. So we really didn't get into specific regulations at this work session, but just the organizational components. In general, it's a fairly well organized code from our sort of experiences, but there were some changes that we presented to commission and recommended. One of those, namely, being taking what is currently Article 3, the sort of zoning districts and land uses components of the code, and splitting those out into two separate articles, so that those regulations are sort of clustered together where they make sense. They're easier to find, more usable, and more readily organized into tables and graphical elements. An example of this in the current code, these are sort of screenshots from the MuniCode interface. I'm sure some folks on the call have seen these many times. Development standards and regulations are contained in multiple tables spread throughout an article. And we want to move from that format into a more consolidated model where all of the sort of high-level pertinent information can be found in one place for each zoning district, with more detailed definitions and references contained later on in that chapter. So you can see high level, what does my property allow? What does my district allow? And dig into the details further behind. So this was some of the examples of our past work that we presented to the commission in September. Showing them these materials and after our discussion, sort of high level takeaways, the direction we got, we asked, does this proposed reorganization fit with the stated goals for the project? Yes. Are these changes intuitive and logical? Do they actually help to organize the code in a more usable way? Again, commission said, yes, make it happen. Wanted to sort of hit on these key points of making it graphical, making it legible, organizing it in a way that flows sort of naturally. And another note that commission sort of gave us was that they want us to focus very heavily during the course of this project on the public engagement piece, sort of work that Interboro and we're doing to get input from you, the members of the public, and really listen to what you have to say and integrate that throughout the entire project. So moving on to the next work session, this was just over a week ago now. We went back to commission to talk a little bit more down in the dirt about zoning districts. Now, the high-level goals for this section, taken again from adopted policy documents and other guidance, were to really look for more opportunities for infill development, in closer to the core of town and less sort of on the edges, in a way that provides more options for housing across the city, especially attainable and more affordable housing, supporting higher densities in certain areas, even if that meant looking at building heights, and overall simplifying the code, sort of reducing the number of districts came directly from the community plan. We looked at all of the existing districts in the current code, sort of looked at where they are in town spatially, how much area they occupy, what districts were the most and least common. And our analysis sort of led us to realize that the residential districts in particular need a closer focus. And we ended up sort of spending most of this work session discussing residential districts. Together, they represent about half the land area of the city. The reasoning behind spending more time to think upfront about those residential zoning districts is really that a huge takeaway for this project and a huge goal in the community plan is to create sort of more accessible, more attainable housing options throughout town, but especially in the core areas of town, places where you might see more infill development and less greenfield new construction. And that could take many different forms. And this slide sort of just shows at a high level, what a block can look like in town with a variety of housing types coexisting together. To make this work happen, we began by modeling what the existing standards in the code would sort of allow you to do. In this exercise, we looked at a 6,000 square foot lot, sort of not necessarily a random number, a realistic enough size of lot for in town, and just toyed around with, how many units could you fit on a site? How high can you build? How many parking spaces did you need? What coverage were you allowed? And we found that you did see generally a gradual progression in density up through the zoning districts, with R5 being a good deal more intense. But that there were a variety of limiting factors. In some cases, there were things like FAR and lot coverage. In other cases, it was really the number of parking spaces you could fit on your site. And this gave us a really kind of a better understanding of how the existing code works when applied to a more or less real world scenario. From those options, we presented to the commission these sort of three options, option A, B, and C, which were really just different approaches to consolidating residential districts. Option A being sort of bolder approach, as we called it, where you could really fold the lower density districts into one, and then the higher intensity districts into another. Option B and C being a little progressively less compact as you go. And we thought that given the very sort of clear direction in the community plan calling for consolidation of districts, more infill development, that pursuing option A would be an appropriate track to follow. Switching gears just a little bit, during this work session, we also talked about transitions, specifically zone edge transitions, which we had some great conversations with the folks from NENA earlier in the week about. We know comes up sort of a lot in the community. The current standard, more or less, is shown on the screen, 45-degree angle at the edge of certain zones. And we presented to commission sort of examples of different approaches to transitions, whether that's using landscaping, step backs as you get taller buildings in one zoning district next to another, sort of just more nuanced and different ways that you can approach transitions that aren't sort of cut and dry, one size fits all, and could maybe be more sensitive to the existing neighborhood context. So again, big picture takeaways we got from commission. There was a general consensus that option A, the bolder approach to consolidating residential districts, is the way to go. We asked if more height might be appropriate to consider in parts of town, and they said yes, especially given that different approaches to transitions could sort of ease into that height and allow it to fit in more places in town. The images at right are sort of models we did of various commercial districts and the current sort of maximum height allowances. So I'll end at that. Colin, take it away just for the last few, but we just wanted to say thank you again for coming. Please stay involved. Hit on Engage Bozeman again, the website that has all the information will be updated regularly. Sort of remind you of those upcoming dates, both for future commission work sessions as well as our future Code Connect webinars, which we're going to be doing on a pretty regular basis as well, with periodic updates on our progress. Well, you're on mute, Colin.
Wasn't I complaining about that earlier? Thanks, Ryan. I'll turn it over to Danny. So that's kind of our slides for the evening. So we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Any questions that you have for us?
Thanks all. Yeah, I know that was a lot of really good information in a short amount of time. But yeah, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. You can go down to that bottom navigation bar and click reactions. And then there's that little raise hand at the bottom of the menu there. I see Marcia with your hand raised. Go ahead and come off mute, Marcia.
Okay, there we go. I'll lower my hand. I have a lot of questions, but first of all, thanks for that great succinct presentation. And I'm excited about the level of public engagement because I've not really seen it done to this level before, where it's really caught my attention. The pop-up, even I was able to swing by one of those. And anyway, first of all, thank you. So thank you for taking this approach. I'm really glad that the city found you guys, or you found them, however it happened. So I'm just going to ask one question and then take my turn. First of all, with the work sessions, with the topics that you've already covered, when and will there be a chance to revisit those subjects, and how do we go about doing that?
Tom, you
Yeah.
wanna?
Yeah, I'll throw that one to Tom and can fill in as needed.
Yeah, so for example, well, let me back up, pardon me. It's a great question. This is going to be an iterative process with a limit in time. So we have been given a pretty short time frame, as Ryan had suggested, and it's a lot of work to do in a fairly short period of time. So what that means is we'll have an opportunity to consider the input that's happened. And as Code Studio develops sort of sections or pieces of the code, we'll have some opportunity to consider and evaluate what it means. That will be at future times. So we really need to get through the whole code update first so we can start harmonizing these individual pieces to ensure that they work together. Our code has evolved and developed to what it is today because we often react, and many times we try to be proactive, but we simply do react on occasion and have unintended consequences, and things get sort of complicated and may impact other parts of our code. So we do need to ensure that everything works in harmony. That's one of the nice things working with Code Studio. They've got that horsepower to be able to do that. At the moment, we don't have those public venues set up for evaluating what's going on because it's just a little bit too far out at the moment. But the commission did explicitly state, while they are supportive of the more aggressive approach to consolidation in our residential districts, and again, that's residential only, we're going to consider commercial districts in the future. That was with a caveat. And it was a caveat is exactly how will the transitions piece work. So as we evolve and develop those, we have to put those together and ensure that you, the public, and that we are furthering the goals and objectives that we've already established. But did we get the numbers correct? So there will be some feedback loops. And I guess I'll stop there because it's not completely set in stone or exact dates when those will happen, but there'll be some opportunities as we move forward later this winter as we start to get, and even into the spring, and Colin and Ryan can kind of correct me of when those deliverables we might start seeing those deliverables.
Yeah, I'll hop in here. Thanks, Tom. Colin or Ryan, could you go back to that timeline slide? So yeah, I'll just say that, these work sessions are really high level direction from City Commission on sort of which avenue to take. And then we're going to continue to have more specific conversations on how that overall direction plays out in actual code updates. So after we get through these work sessions, that's when that code language will, go out for public review, and we'll sort of like take the show on the road and do some more sessions like this, the Code Connect style session, where we say, here's what we heard from City Commission. Here's what we heard from the community via Engage Bozeman, via these outreach intercept events, via additional code connects, and here's how that input plays out in these code revisions. So that again will be the time when y'all will see how your input.
So to clarify, the answer is, I'm hearing two things. I just want to be sure I'm getting this right. One is that feedback loop doesn't really start again until all the work sessions are going to go, and the feedback doesn't start till summer 23. It looks like here for public review. And then the second part of that, am I right about that?
Yep.
Okay. And then the second part isn't clear to me is that, can people that say missed the transition discussion like moi and want to add thoughts while that's on their minds, can we still, is there any advantage or benefit to sending those thoughts into the Engage progress now, or does one need to wait until the public review?
No, yeah, we welcome that input now, Marcia. Definitely leave your
Mhm.
comments on the Engage Bozeman page. And that once you get them in, that'll help us formulate that code. And so you'll see that input.
So that would be a way to hit those past sessions if we
Yep.
weren't able to participate. Okay.
Yeah. And we definitely, for anyone who has sort of those same questions, we encourage you to go back and watch those city commission work sessions and submit your comment based on that.
Okay. Thank you.
That's for the folks who want to do deep dives. I'll say that the intercept activities hit on these same topics like building heights, transitions, zoning districts. And that's sort of the broader public's opportunity to provide input in a shorter time frame, and a time frame that works for them out in the community on the Engage Bozeman site. All of those intercept activities touch on the same topics and will be adapted for Engage Bozeman as well. So we'll have opportunities for folks to chime in that way on the Engage Bozeman page.
Yeah, we're working to try and get some of that intercept activity online so people can participate that way.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands raised, or I'm not seeing anything in the chat?
Oh, well, I have more questions.
We'll do a going once, going twice kind of
Yeah,
thing here,
definitely.
Marcia, and then, yeah. Okay, so that's it. Going once, going twice.
Sold.
Emily, I see you lurking there. Okay,
I'm
we
trying
have-
to find where do you raise it?
It's
there's
okay.
a little reactions button down there at the bottom, but I've just got one question rolling into the chat box here. And it says, given Bozeman is situated in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, will the presence of wildlife be taken into consideration in any of these zoning changes? We actually just talked about that this week in one of our project team meetings. So the community plan talks about the value of sort of density and infill and reducing encroachment onto those wildlife corridors in the broader sense. But the city of Bozeman is also entering into this project called the Gallatin Valley Sensitive Lands Protection Plan. And that plan is really focused on wildlife corridors and sort of these sensitive areas in the valley that we want to protect as development pressure increases. So that project is really where those specific conversations will happen. So there's that. Is there anything else from maybe Tom or the project team that they want to add in to that question around wildlife and zoning changes?
Danny, I'll throw a couple of comments in. That is kind of it's always an important theme for our community, for the city of Bozeman, and really Gallatin County and the region as a whole. This is one of the kind of challenges that we have when we look at the city of Bozeman itself, which kind of comes from that perspective of being an urban location. We've generally found that housing people, creating vibrant activity, places of work and transportation, that it's difficult to fully balance all of these things at the same time. In addition to that, the charge that Code Studio has does have limitations. We are under a kind of a rapid time frame. So as you look at these work sessions that we have here, and this parlays to the previous question of, when do we get to take a look at this thing? The issue is when we're looking at riparian and natural resource protection, stormwater management, building heights, intensities, lot coverage, we're talking about stormwater, delivery of services. They are all related. So if we adjust one piece, it impacts the other. So it's really a huge task that this team has to pull together at the last minute. And the kind of the issue of wildlife corridors itself is not one of the primary objectives of this particular project. So we will touch on it. We already have our fairly robust, water course and stream setbacks that are largely influenced by state and federal regulations. So we will be having a conversation on it, but it will not be one of our work sessions specifically. one of the bigger issues of parking, transportation, building height, densities. Those will be sort of our primary objectives with this project.
Thanks, Tom. Emily, go for it.
So I had I guess maybe half question, half comment, but in talking to my neighbors about this, you know, and I know you guys are doing the outreach, in rural partners, we're doing those tables. One thing that came up a couple times in my conversations was questions about what UDC is, and you know, there's kind of a dry, if you will, answer that it's one tool that's the regulations. It's the regulations and one of the tools to implement things in the different, you know, like our growth policy.
Mhm.
But I was just thinking that maybe even on the Engage website, addressing some kind of, you know, like zoom way out and say like, so what is code? Why do we have it? Where does that authority come from? And so like, what is code supposed to do and what is it, but also what does it not do? Because people have brought stuff up, ideas, and I'm like, that's not really a code thing. Like nothing in the code says that your neighbor can't listen to Pantera 24/7. You know, and so I'm just wondering if you guys, you're out in the community, if you guys have encountered that as well, where maybe, you know, some basic definitions about what it is, what it's not, what we want it to accomplish, and who has that authority, just some kind of basic stuff.
I think we could do that. Do we have any kind of FAQs on the website, or do we have the ability to do that, Ryan?
We certainly have the ability. That's a great idea. We don't have anything like that at present.
What is the
We
UDC?
should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point, Emily. So thanks for that.
I just think that most people who work with the UDC, it's typically for development purposes. I mean, and that could be something as small as putting a fence in at your property and finding out what your site triangle is. But for the most part, unless you're actually constructing something, you're not looking at it. But that doesn't mean that, you know, so pointing out explicitly to people what it does accomplish, but I think also explaining the limitations of it that are built into it, and for good reasons, would be helpful in really channeling and targeting that engagement effort.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, that's a great piece of input. That's something we can definitely develop and put up on the Engage Bozeman site. All right. Have a question in the chat here. How will the Prost plan incorporate this project timeline into the plan that's just being completed and passed now? So the Prost plan is the Parks, Recreation, Out and Open Spaces and Trails plan. And that plan is being updated now. It's got another fun acronym. The Parks, Recreation and Active Transportation Plan is the update of that Prost plan. So you may have engaged in that process this last summer, but the Parks plan or the Parks work session will address a lot of the recommendations and action items in the Parks, Rec and Active Transportation Plan.
Is that in February, Ryan? Yes. Yeah.
It is, yeah. I think, and Tom, you know, maybe this is overstepping, but I think the goal is for that Parks plan update to be completed sometime around the turn of the year, early next year. So hopefully it should be at least in its final sort of draft form well before this process is over.
Yeah, I'm going to add one more thing, just not to complicate things, but the city has so many concurrent projects going on right now because for all sorts of reasons. We are all communicating with one another. And one thing to keep in mind about this zoning code, this development code, is it's not something that's static. We last revised and significantly altered this approximately 5 years ago. And since then, on an annual basis, we continue to make modifications to the development code, 2 to 5 times a year. So it's always changing. So we're aware that when this revised and new Parks and Open Space plan is adopted, it may mean adjusting some of the standards that we have in our development code that we adopt with this project. There are always a few unforeseen challenges to bring these projects to a close with all the influences that are going on. So we are communicating, they influence one another, and we'll likely have to make small modifications at the end of it. Just because we have to keep moving, we'll complete this and we'll keep moving forward. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but it's something to keep in mind.
Christopher, go for it. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Christopher, and ask away.
Okay, there. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, I was just rattling on. I said, I don't know if this is the right place to ask this question or not. It may be more for the sensitive land study group. But you mentioned earlier, I think it was Tom said that, that there's state and federal regulations about stream corridor setbacks and that sort of thing, which I'm aware of. But I'm just wondering, does the city ever have the ability to make a corridor that is wider than what is in a state or federal regulation by any means, or is that kind of set at the state or federal level? And if the city wanted to do that, is there a means for them to do it and kind of sweeten the pot of like, they recognize this is a really sensitive area and we'd prefer there not be building or foundations or whatever it is even further from this little corridor? Do they have the ability to do that by any mechanism?
Interesting question. I'm going to try to answer it really as short as possible. Yes and no. Certain standards that the state establishes, local jurisdictions are strictly prohibited to doing something more rigorous than what the state has. There's a very difficult process that the city can go through to show by data that it is beneficial. We may be able to get something that's more stringent. However, a number of, specifically talking about setbacks for water courses, riparian areas, those types of things are influenced by state and federal regulations for water quality. And the City of Bozeman, because we are a municipal jurisdiction, we do have a federal permit for water discharge for the city. So we do need to follow those rules to ensure that any water discharge is meeting those minimum standards. With respect to additional watercourse setbacks, it is possible that the city can adopt more stringent standards than we perhaps have for today. As you're probably aware, those do balance the real kind of the elephant in the room of land costs and how do we deal with that. And as we grow, particularly going west, there's quite a bit of water issues that are related to what the land that's not developed going west. I'll stop there. I didn't mean to confuse things. Colin and Ryan, you may have some thoughts from outside of our jurisdiction, but again, the wildlife corridor question has not been identified by the commission yet as part of this project. So we're not going to necessarily examine those really closely. What we have today will certainly be a part of our development code tomorrow, But we're at the moment, that's not going to be involved in one of the work sessions or one of our deep dives as of today.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Tom, so thanks.
Okay, I have one repeat question asker in the chat here. And so I think if there's no one else who'd like to raise their hand, we might wrap back around to Marcia.
Although I see a question in the chat from Lorene. Did you want to do that one first?
Yeah,
I
Lorene
see it
asked
as
one
well.
already, but
Oh.
we'll go to you, Marcia,
Oh.
and then we'll go back to Lorene.
Okay, so I've heard, high level used a lot and deep dive a little bit, and then the work session topics. So my question is, on the Engage website, can you go into more detail, maybe add more details about, say, the sustainability topic or all the topics, so that when people are looking at them, they know what will be covered and won't waste their own time? Because like under sustainability, you could have stuff like wildlife corridors, but it sounds like that won't be covered. So in particular, I'm interested in details from the climate plan, and also, our water issues being covered in, hopefully those are prioritized. And I'm not sure what's prioritized under sustainability. So I thought that would be great to add. And then I wasn't sure what was meant about when do we get to deep dive? Like if people have specifics, would that be in the public review time or during the work sessions?
Yeah, so I think most of the meat of what will be covered is in that agenda packet that goes out the Thursday before the city commission meeting. But another way that we'll be sort of previewing and providing other pathways for people to provide input on those topics that are covered in the work session is through the Intercept engagement activity and the digitization of that content. So as we work to sort of complete the digital version of that Intercept activity, we'll put those polls or engagement topics up on Engage Bozeman for all of the upcoming work sessions. So I can't commit to you, Marcia, like when we'll have those sustainability topics up on Engage Bozeman, but we can try and do a bit more of a preview on those topics potentially before the commission packet goes out if we've got that engagement content ready to go.
That would be great.
I think it's fair to say that we don't necessarily know what those topics are ourselves as the kind of outside consultant until we get closer to each work session and we start having those conversations with staff and understanding what the priorities are for the city. So we're still, for example, we're still working through the sustainability topics right now in preparation for that November 15th meeting. And so another example would be, I think transportation is our last working session in March. And so until we get closer to that date, we're not going to really understand, transportation could be all sorts of issues. And so we're not going to know until closer to February, for example, what we're going to be talking about at that work session.
Okay, thanks. Unfortunately, the agenda packet doesn't go out until about Thursday night for the city commission meeting the following Tuesday. So it just allows a very short period of time. So that's why I was wondering if there's a way of getting ahead on that. But thank you.
Yeah, I would say that the public has just as much reading as they want to do. But that's the timeline that City Commission is given to dig into these big topics. And that's why those work sessions are meant to provide sort of a reasonably high level amount of information and discussion question to reflect on in that time period. So yeah, thanks for the clarification, Colin. And yep, that work is ongoing, and there'll be different bites of the apple along the way. Okay, so Lorene asks, what Montana legislature issues in the 2023 session are a concern to the consultants that could affect the timeline or UDC adoptions? I'll turn that over to Code.
I'm not sure in terms of affecting the timeline, but I know the governor has a affordable housing task force, and I know they have made some recommendations that could affect this project. So, for example, there are some recommendations in there with regards to, you know, single family development and the future of that, and, you know, minimum intensities associated in certain zoning districts that I guess if implemented or adopted by the legislator, that, you know, some of the issues that we're talking about as this project in terms of consolidating down those zoning districts may kind of be a moot point if the state tells us that cities have to do this anyhow. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. I guess we also have to be aware that some of these issues won't necessarily go anywhere. So, you know, we just got to be following it and make sure we're nimble enough to be able to accommodate anything that we need to accommodate when it comes out.
Thanks, Colin. Tom, any follow-up on that from the city side?
Colin nailed it well. I'll add that we are tracking and sort of the evolution of what policies our legislature will consider at the next session. We are aware that, and this is historically pretty consistent, there's always some proposals for subdivision review, zoning codes, and other things that may impact the management and, you know, the kind of the local control. I agree with Colin. I don't believe it will change the schedule that we have. It may mean that if we adopt what we have today and then special sessions are called, the state changes some rules and regulations, we'll simply have to respond to those and we'll modify as needed and if needed. But it's a good question. We'll keep an eye on it and we'll see. It'll be an unusual, we'll see what they come up with.
Thanks, Tom. All right, any other questions floating around out there in the 8 minutes that we have left? I see one here in the chat from Marcia. Can Code meet with other neighborhoods? Yeah, so we're looking for opportunities to get in front of folks, and that would be mostly through the Interborough team and our outreach team with MSU. But yeah, if there are specific topics that you would like to convey to Code, you're free to do that at any time. Code, anything to add to that?
No, we're happy to meet with whoever we can within the bounds of the project. So it's fairly easy to meet with folks virtually. So, you know, if we can get enough people together with the same kind of interest to talk about a topic or, you know, related topics, I think that makes a bunch of sense.
Great. Well, Marcia and I talk often, so I'm sure that, yeah, we can work together and set something up if there's interest.
Wonderful.
All right, and Emily asked in the chat here, a follow-up from her earlier question, will the wildland urban interface be taken into consideration with any zoning changes?
I'll jump in really quickly. We're certainly aware of that. We are letting our emergency services in the fire department essentially take lead on this and consulting with them to ensure that how and kind of where we grow, we can manage any life safety issues. So we do that through a number of, you know, what's different about us. And I realize that there's some pretty extreme situations that have occurred over the last few years, but we are looking at that. It is likely less dealing with zoning code than it would be with building code and infrastructure plans, water availability, transportation, and some of the real foundational pieces to ensure that the city can respond to unforeseen incident. That's about as far as we've gone at this moment. Danny, if you had any information behind and what you've heard from your location, please add.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Tom. I think the first thing that came to mind again for me was that sensitive lands protection plan, that those sort of urban wildland interfaces is more of a focus of that effort. But yeah, thanks for bringing in the fire perspective. And I put this in the chat as well, but that sensitive lands protection plan effort will also have an engagement component. And so again, you can find info on that on the Engage Bozeman website when that effort launches here in the next couple months or so. I know the holidays are coming up, so if not before the holidays, you can anticipate some news on that early in the new year. And that effort will also include sort of a public mapping effort. And so we're going to be using ArcGIS Hub as a place where folks can do some interactive mapping and look at some of the data that the city is considering and other regional partners are considering in that effort. So stay tuned. You're welcome, Emily. All right, we've got about 4 minutes left. Anything else floating around out there?
Can you put that last slide up, Ryan, just so folks will know what we're doing next, in case they're interested? We'll be back to do another one of these Code Connect meetings on December 1st, and we will be talking more specifically about sustainability. So we'll have someone from Logan Simpson here to help facilitate that conversation. So that will be, hot on the tails of the sustainability work session with the commission. And so we will share with you what we shared with the commission and hopefully some of the direction that they gave us at that session. And then would be, really interested to hear what you all have to say about it. And so just so everybody understands, we will be talking about parking on January 24th. And so we're imagining that is going to be a very robust conversation. It always is when it comes to parking. And then in February, we'll be talking about implementing the parks plan. And then in March, we'll be talking about transportation. And just finally, we're going to have these Code Connect meetings at regular times throughout the next year. So look to when those dates come out, but we have scheduled the February Code Connect webinar on the 2nd. And so we'll be putting all these dates, if they're not already on there, on the Engage Bozeman website. And so that is going to be our primary tool for getting information out to people. So please bookmark that and check it on a regular basis.
Yeah. And just, to touch on that a little bit, and I think a comment that was made earlier, while this is the sort of series of topics we're focusing on during the City Commission work sessions, you are please welcome, and we look forward to hearing comments about really any topic at any time through the website. So, if you miss a work session or you want to bring up a point that was discussed previously in September or October, please let us know anytime.
And I also think you can sign up for emails on that website if you haven't done so yet. And we are trying to send those out kind of monthly at the beginning of every month so that people will understand what's happening for that month.
Making my job easy, Colin and Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining this evening. And you are free to continue to ask questions on that Engage Bozeman website, or reach out to the project team. Our contact information is there. I'll put my email address in the chat here. But again, this is recorded, and we'll have this recording up on the Engage Bozeman page so you can share with your friends and neighbors. And if we don't see you before the next Code Connect meeting, be well, and thank you.
Tell your friends and neighbors to get involved.
Please.
The more people we can get to hear from and have discussions with, the better.
That's
And then
great.
be on the lookout for the Interborough/MSU folks. They're going to be doing some more pop-ups around town here soon. And when we figure out those dates and locations, we'll get those up on the website as well.
Yep, find us at the Christmas Stroll on December 3rd.
There you go.
And then the winter farmers markets as well. We're looking to plug into some of those dates. All right. Thanks all. Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.